education is preparation for reparations.
Thank you, Clive. Thank you for welcoming me to this historic conference, family. I'm honoured to be speaking today. My name is Robin. I'm a child of Stroud, the valleys where I still live and work with my group sister, Stroud in Internationalist Solidarity, Together for Earth Repair. And before that, I'm a descendant of those who worked the land in Yorkshire and Kernow, Cornwall in English, for generations. I sit on the ally side of this conversation with Sister, and in my role as one of the PRELA, Planner Repairs, Action Learning Educational Revolution coordinators, and I've got a lot to say, so let's begin. I'll do my best. I'm dyslexic as well, if that buys me extra time. It did my exam. Firstly, I want to ground in the horrific nature of the crimes against our African kin that we are discussing here and that some of my fellow speakers have said. The violence that emanated from this city in particular that went out across the waves. Violence that for hundreds of years brought the most horrendous brutality to the shores of Africa. The turning of the Atlantic into a mass graveyard and the sadistic deculturation of our siblings. The colonisation that followed, the murderous boarding schools that robbed their children of their sacred sense of self. The whole-scale pillage of the land, and of course, the continued backstabbing domination that is neocolonialism. Half a millennia of unending violence and brutality that built and still builds the world we live in today. I salute every African ancestor on who this horror was visited. Those who fought for life and their children, it is on their shoulders we stand. While we often rightly name the stones and institutions of our society built on their blood and toil, we too often forget that it was them who and their resistance that even taught us the meaning of human rights. My Uncle Kofi tells us clearly that it was never the Oxford Dons, those who for generations preached the subjugation of our African siblings, who taught us anything compared to Toussaint Louverture and the Haitians, Casilda Kunduni and her Maroons in Colombia, Kwame Nkrumah, Steve Biko, Marielle Franco, who I wear on my shirt, and hundreds more, who proved again and again their humanity through their resistance and bravery, and in the process forced our so-called learned ones here to abandon their white supremacy. I say this to show the true debt our society owes to our global family and especially our African kin who have been the actual civilizing force in this whole sorry story. A force that has taught us here the very meaning of even our own humanity. And this is where I'll pivot to my core work these days, PRIM building. PRIM standing for the People's Reparations International Movement, an invitation from the ISMAR, the International Social Movement for African Reparations, to come together as a global family struggling for repair. And the questions that are at its heart, the questions that reparation poses to us all. Yes, what debts do we owe our siblings? And also, what are the wounds in our peoplehood? What is our case, our community's case for reparations? A question that is essential if we are to understand the truth in the word ally, a word that directly means bound together and echoes the truth of solidarity that our Indigenous Australian aunties taught us when they said, if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. I know my society is sick. I know the sickness that breeds such violence and domination and blindness that is the Mahangamizi is still rife within my people. And yet I know this violence was born in the ranks of our elites. That there in their big houses, distant from the land and honest work, their separation festered for power and began a war against life. I name the wounds of the enclosures, of the witch trials, of the mass incarceration of our youth in factories here and much more. All this, of course, alongside the dark holes in our collective psyche that result from dishing out so much violence onto the world and our collective family. I name these wounds as in desperate need of healing if we are to repair our own peoplehood here, and that this is our reparatory journey and it must be one of relationship with yourselves. And as all relationships are, it is internal and external. We cannot sit here on this panel and position ourselves simply as beneficiaries. No one truly benefits from abuse. And part of our role as allies is to humble ourselves and deeply own that yes, education is preparation for reparations, as our African kin say. And so then, what do we need to learn if we are to be part of this struggle, if we are to help build the PRIM? In Sister, we ask, how can we be a powerful sister again in a global family of resistance? We have learned this question through the PRELA process that I mentioned at the beginning, a grassroots educational initiative to connect communities fighting and ready to fight for planet repairs. And we have begun this journey, as we've learned again from yourselves and the African kin in particular, with the education of who our ancestors really are, and in whose legacy do we wish to stand. Here I name Sylvia Pankhurst, Basil Davidson, June Milne, Jessie Donaldson and Lydia Harding. I name Robert Wedderburn's axe laid to the root, Granville Sharp and Thomas Clarkson's deep friendship and solidarity with Olaudah Aquino. I name Elizabeth Hayrick's immediate abolition, and from the flatlands just outside my own valleys, the work of Joseph Sturge, who struggled for against the so-called apprenticeship scheme in Jamaica following so-called abolition. I am an heir of their resistance, for these are my ancestors. Remembering that heir means a person who inherits and continues the work of their predecessor. Well, my work is resistance, and I will continue the legacy of those who fought, who gave their lives in the abolition struggle, the anti-imperial struggle, and the deepest solidarity with our global family. Right now, we're working especially with our youth to raise up these names. We're reclaiming space to amplify our family's resistance. One of our 17-year-olds is speaking on a panel in another room right now on reparations. We're asking about our own self-determination and dignity. And yes, we're shifting resources, but not out of guilt, because this is the legacy into which we stand. The legacy of those from this land who have known we are bound together and who have always shifted stolen power back into the hands of those ready to break the shackles. Right now through Prela, we are linking with our young siblings and their communities in Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali as they reject French imperialism. In Ghana, Colombia, Peru, Mexico and beyond, where indigenous communities are rising to retake their lands. And so I will finish here to say my ancestors' enemies, our ancestors' enemies, have always been those obsessed with power. Those who enclosed the forest, kicked us from their lands and pulled us into their wars of domination. You will see earlier that I did not name William Wilberforce here, but I will name him now among the ranks of the elites that I call out, even the good ones, who with stolen power sweep in to steal the story of a struggle, to delay and dampen the real resistance, and as he did, attempting to silence the women who were at the heart of the abolition movement here, and as he did when we were raised here to know his name and not Toussaint Louverture's. And so I warn my friends here on the panel, yes, bring your families into this, yes, bring your money, but bring your wounds too, bring your need to repair. Know the debt you owe the working people of this country too, and do not try to write this story without us. Thank you.
Education is preparation for reparations.